Ladies, gentlemen, good morning. This is author Germinal Van. It's been a while. I have not posted a video on my YouTube channel, and there is a good reason for it because the video of today is to present you my fifth book entitled The Efficiency of Capitalism, the Economic and Political Philosophy of the Free Market. It is right here and it is available on Amazon.com. So please go grab your copy as soon as possible. Now the big question is, why did I decide to write this book? So of course there is a growing feeling, or should I say growing resentment against capitalism. People are saying that capitalism is the only system that creates inequality, is the only system that creates exploitation, is the only system that makes the rich richer and the poor poorer, and it is the only system that favors corporations. Of course, these are all myth, and it's time to debunk them. So, first, capitalism creates inequality. True, it does. And the reason why capitalism does create inequality is for the simple reason that human beings are not equal. I know it may shock some people, but no, we're not equal. Human beings are not. And capitalism is very unfair because it rewards those who produce. Simple as that. So if you're home not doing much, not being creative or productive, you're not going to generate money. But if you're a very productive person, you're creating venues for yourself to generate money. It takes time, but it comes to that outcome at the end of the day. You do generate money. And it does also create inequality because human beings are naturally individualistic beings. We are driven by profit. We want to keep the profit of what we have produced. I don't know if isn't that legitimate to you? I think it is legitimate to me that what you put the work for, you get to keep the benefit of what you put the work for. Doesn't it make sense to you, or the state has to come and take away what you produce and give it to someone who hasn't produced? So yes, capitalism creates inequality, but it is a legitimate inequality because capitalism forces people to not be lazy. It forces people to actually be innovative. That's why entrepreneurship is one of the pillars, one of the foundations of capitalism. We have many billionaires on earth, but we have a society like the United States where we have a free market and where you have people who were born into socio-economic conditions tremendously difficult, and they thrive because they made choices that enable them to move from one social class to another social class. We have, for instance, Oprah Winfrey. We all know her story. We all know how rough her life was. We all know all the people who brought her down, who were saying that she cannot make it as a journalist because she's not competent enough. Now we all know that Oprah Winfrey, sorry, is the most richest black woman in America. She worth almost $3 billion. How do you explain that? How do you explain that? If it wasn't for capitalism, I don't know how she would have made it. Because in a collectivist society, in a socialist society, the state is the one deciding for everything. So if the state doesn't like you, you're not going to thrive. When you have places like the Soviet Union, for instance, or even Eastern Europe, you see how you see a great disparity. A great disparity. People who work for the government were rich and the rest were poor. No business, nobody can create anything. If you do, the state will confiscate what you're doing. So um, socialist societies are the one that create more inequality than capitalism. Capitalism only rewards those who produce. You want to be rich, you want to be self-sufficient, you need to produce. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. It's that simple. Second, they say that capitalism is a system of exploitation. That's not true. It's not true simply because the essence of capitalism at the end of the day is voluntary exchange, mutual agreement. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, and Frederick Engels wrote the the condition of the working class in England. And when Engels was living in England, he saw how those workers were treated. But there is something that those who promote equality do not tell you, is that when you go to work for an employer, the employer does not put a gun on your head and say, if you do not agree with the wage I am proposing you, I'm going to kill you. He says, this is the wage I'm proposing you because this is what you're worth according to me. You have the choice to take it or to find another job somewhere. That's all. You have the choice to either take the wage and do the work. Yes, it's not pleasant. I've been through that myself. I take my own example. I've worked low skill job. I work in the restaurant industry. I wasn't paid well, but I need some money. Did they exploit me? No, it's not exploitation because I agree voluntarily to accept the wage that they were proposing me. Of course, you have the possibility to negotiate your wage. If now the employer doesn't want to negotiate, well, you have the freedom to leave. You're not coerced to stay. No one puts a gun on your head and say that you're coerced or you're forced to take that wage. Otherwise, we're going to kill you or kill your family. No. You willingly accept to take that wage because you need some money. You need to put food on the table for your family. That's all it's about. Because exploitation means that you force someone to do a work without giving him any compensation. Slavery was exploitation. Colonization was exploitation because those people work long hours with no compensation. Whether it was slavery in the United States, slavery in Brazil, even slavery in Europe between Western and Eastern Europeans, or whether it was colonization in Africa and even in South America. Yes, it happened everywhere. Exploitation is when you're working without remuneration. But if you're paid for the work you do, you're not exploited. If you don't like the work you do, you can leave. If you know that if you leave, it will be hard for you to feed your family, sorry, you have to deal with it. That's a capitalistic system, but it is not exploitation. And then they say as well that capitalism makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. That's of course not true as well. And why is it not true? For the simple reason that capitalism is the only system that creates wealth. How a system that creates wealth makes you poorer? It's a mutual benefit. You are paid for the work you do. In the book, I explained something. You know, people think that when they're within a social class bracket, they're condemned to stay in that bracket. Of course not. There's what we call social mobility. It means that you start at a level that is, of course, pretty much low, and that you climb the ladder. In the book, I explained this. We have the hierarchy of competence. So we have unconscious incompetent, which means that you are starting a task in which you have no idea, you have no skill in it. So that's why here we call entry-level job. It means that you may have a theoretical knowledge of the job you have to do, but you don't have any practical experience of the tasks you have to do. So of course, when you start, your salary is going to be low. It's going to be very low in America. I know the general entry level salary, it's around $38,000 a year. So yeah, it is low. But at the same time, usually people who start with that salary are people who are in their 20s. And then you start the work, and you start becoming cognitive of certain factors. So now you move to what we call conscious incompetent. It means that now you're aware of certain procedures of the task you're performing in, but you're still not competent enough. But it shows that you're making progress you're developing a skill that you did not. So as you develop the skill that you didn't have, your salary slowly increase. And then you now move to conscious competent, which means that that's the third level of the hierarchy of competence, which means that you're now proficient in what you do. So when you reach that level, your salary increase. As your salary increase, you're also moving from one social bracket to another social bracket. So even if you start probably at $38,000 a year, if you're now a conscious, competent person, which means that you're proficient, maybe now your salary moves to $50,000 or $60,000, because you develop a skill, you're advancing your skill, you're increasing your skills. So of course your salary is going to increase as well. So you become self-sufficient at this point. How are you getting poorer? It doesn't make sense. You're becoming self-sufficient. And then once you have reached the level of proficiency, and you keep doing the same thing you have been doing for a long time, you are now climbing to the upper class, which to reach that level you have to be now unconscious competent, which means that even closed eyes you can do the work, because you've been doing it for so long, it becomes second nature to you. And those people are what we call experts. Their salary range within $100,000 or $200,000. No one start life at 20 years old with a $200,000 salary. It doesn't exist unless you're an entrepreneur. Don't get me wrong. Unless you start entrepreneurship really early in your life, no problem. But otherwise, if you're a regular person like myself and everyone else, you do not become rich in your 20s. You become rich in your 40s or 50s. That's when you can afford buying property. You can afford investing in stocks and stuff like that. So the rich get richer in capitalism, and the poor gets richer as well, because the poor is enabled to move from one social class to another, is enabled to attain self-sufficiency. Let me give you an example. When you look at Eastern Europe before 1990 had a living standard substantially below the level of poverty. According to the OECD, the world level of poverty was at 43% before 1990. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the failure of socialism as a global economic system, that number shrunk from 43 to 21%. Because most countries that were collectivists adopt a more individualistic approach. So they adopt capitalism. So it raised the living standard of everyone. Those who were poor were able to make a living for themselves. Capitalism is the only system that enables the amelioration of the human condition. It is the only system that enables people to improve their condition of living, the living standard. Socialism doesn't do that. And you see people who are still promoting socialism while they live here and they benefit from all the wonders of capitalism. I find that funny and nonetheless hypocritical. And lastly, people are saying that capitalism favors corporation. No, capitalism doesn't. Crony capitalism does. And who creates crony capitalism? The government. Yep. Because when the government intervenes in the economy, it imposes regulations. And those regulations will inevitably favor some businesses over others. If we had a true laissez-faire economy, so where there is no government regulation in the economy, it would be hard for corporations to actually compete, because they will have a real competition against other businesses. But because the government puts regulation in the economy, so corporations now do have the monopoly of the means of production. So when you see, for instance, a corporation like Amazon, No one can compete with Amazon anymore because the government gives favors to Amazon that it will not give to the man in the neighborhood who is trying to start his business. The man in the neighborhood who is trying to start his business will be compelled to abide by many rules, regulations, and licenses and stuff like that. It will be hard. It was going to have to raise prices so that it can stay in business. But for corporations like Amazon or Google or, I don't know, Walmart, like, the government gives them favors. Because the government loosens regulations on them, and it puts more regulation on mid-sized and small businesses. That's crony capitalism. So capitalism in itself, the free market doesn't create crony capitalism. A regulated market economy does. That's why I do not like mixed economies. Because it favors state-owned enterprise. It favors corporations that the government knows that they can make business with and make profit of it. And they come and say, oh, we put in regulations to have fair competition so that everyone can have access to wealth. No, that's crap. It's not true. And now it's very sad that it's laissez-faire economics in the United States it's dead. No one will want to put laissez-faire economics again, although it is the best system where everyone do truly have a chance to make it. Everyone has a real chance to thrive. But with the government intervening in the economy, controlling price, regulations, and imposing license, there is a huge inequality among businesses. Small businesses will find a hard time to thrive, and corporations will keep the monopoly of what they've been already doing. So when someone tells you that capitalism makes those four things, tell him that that's not true. Yes, it does create inequality, but it creates inequality for good reasons. If you don't want to be at the ladder, you have to produce. It's that simple. If you're lazy, you're gonna stay poor. As I said, no one chooses his socioeconomic condition. No one chooses to be born rich or poor. If you're born rich, good for you. If you're born poor, well, it's hard, but it's not impossible to leave poverty. Personal responsibility always plays an important role in the way for people to get out of poverty. If you don't make rational and good choices, you're gonna stay poor. If you have a kid in your teens, if you have a criminal record, or if you don't finish high school, it's gonna be hard for you to climb the ladder. It's gonna be hard for you to be self-sufficient. People complain about rich people not being taxed. Rich people don't get taxed because they don't have a salary. You may tax corporations, but someone, for instance, like Warren Buffett doesn't have a salary. He has a net worth. A net worth is different than a salary. Rich people do not pay tax because since they don't have a salary, whatever money they make, they invest that into the stock market. The government cannot tax stock market. When the government tried to tax the stock market, we had the Great Depression. Simple as that. That is the reason why I decided to write this book. Because people need to understand that capitalism is a very efficient system. A system that helps everyone to improve the living standard, the economic condition, and also the social condition. That is why I love capitalism. Of course, it is not perfect. It has its flaws. Capitalism, for instance, one of the flaws of capitalism is that it creates discrimination, because if you have your own business, you have the right to decide who you want to employ and who you do not want, and under what criteria. You have that choice. So it means that yes, you're going to leave some people out, but that's yes, it is one of the downfalls of private property. But without private property, there is no exchange value. And without exchange value, there's no price. Without price, there is no determination of wealth. It's simple as that. The book itself is divided in two parts, as the title says, the economic and political philosophy of the free market. So the first part is the economic philosophy of the free market, and the second part is the political philosophy of the free market. So the economic philosophy of the free market, of course, I talk about everything I said earlier. Even talk about monetary policy and inflation for people who want to understand the concept of inflation and how inflation is really important in economic theory. And I also talk about social justice and all other factors that contribute to the market economy. It is a very interesting book. It is 188 pages, and one of my great friends, John Patrick Fahey, wrote the foreword of this book. I am tremendously grateful to him for doing that work. And which is funny, he's a left-wing activist, and he wrote the foreword for my book, which means that it's not because we politically disagree that we need to hate each other. Yes, we ideologically disagree, but we can still be friends. And John, shout out to you. Thank you very much for writing the foreword. And yeah, I think I said everything I have to say. Honestly, thank you guys for listening to me. Go grab your copy on Amazon.com. The book is available as a paperback and Kindle version. So grab your copy and let me know what you think. And the next book that I am going to publish is entitled Democratic Socialism on Trial, Why It Won't Work in America. So for all the people who love Bernie Sanders and democratic socialism, including my friend John Fahey, this book is for you guys. Until then, see you soon.